World War II was by far the deadliest war to ever take place. Not only did the war claim millions of lives, but it also had many negative impacts on the world after the war finished. This video will be explaining most of the world suffered and how their lives were changed after the war. To start off, the worst part of the war was the mass number of deaths. In total, about 50 million to 80 million people died, including soldiers and civilians. Hitler killed approximately 6 million Jews and 5 million non-Jews, including homosexuals, mentally and physically disabled people, and Soviet Union war prisoners.
Concerning the Holocaust, many of the Jewish people are afraid to go home because of the anti-Semitism that still existed. Survivors actually had to go back and rebuild the whole lives. The Jewish people did not have a lot because many of the Nazi soldiers looted most of their house, taking all their valuables. Now the Jewish people were found starving and wandering around, homeless. Many war laws were established, and the Nazi parties, the SS, the SSA, and the Gestapo were considered criminal organizations. Denazification took place in Germany to get rid of Nazis' way of thinking. The Nuremberg trials
Nuremberg. That's a city.
See, told you I'm dyslexic. The Nuremberg trials prosecuted German war crimes for all their hate crimes.
The Russian occupation of Germany was the spark of the Cold War. It was clear that the US and Russia emerged as the world's superpowers, and the tension between the two countries affected their citizens. In Russia, the government was more focused on winning the race to space and the arms race, that they had not realized how corrupt their communist government had become. Many government officials got greedy and didn't follow the rules they created to satisfy their greed. The law-abiding citizens of Russia were starving but were too scared to say anything. People in both countries were afraid that nuclear war would break out and they would never have peace. Communism spread throughout Asia and Africa, and the US was persistent in their campaign to end communism. Neither country could trust each other, and there was a lot of suspecting Russian spies in the US during the 60s and 70s.
The war slowed down worldwide development because everything was put to a pause and all efforts were geared towards winning the war. Development and progression were put to an even bigger delay in Europe when the citizens were too concentrated on regaining their old lives back rather than inventing new things and putting forth new ideas that would make their lives better. The aggression of Israel led to a safe haven for Jewish people, which caused a major conflict between the Jews and the Muslims over the possession of Israel. This increased the tension between the Jews and Muslims, and there is still conflict between the two ethnic groups today.
While most of the world was suffering from the cold, hunger, and poverty, the US was doing well. There was one major social outcome of the war, which was positive. While the men were away at war, women were left on their own and proved that they could do a man's job just as well. They were left to generate income, help with war efforts, and continue to do the jobs they did while the men were still there. In the US, living was made easier because the US became the main manufacturing country and had the most exports after the war. The UN was ultimately created to keep peace as a result of World War II.
Germany was bankrupt, its citizens were living in poverty, affected by starvation, and their freedom was taken away. All Germans were treated like Nazis and discriminated against. Berlin was divided, and the rest of Germany was divided into 4 parts. Allied power forced labor of German citizens and captured Germans in the years following World War II. As many as 4 million Germans were being used as forced labor.
Put a smile on your face. Don't bring everybody